Hey, more Hobbit and lunch today. Anna is eating salmon, one of her favorites, and we are giving the second chapter of The Hobbit a second chance. We tried this on Monday, but then first of all, Anna was in a terrible mood, and on top of that, the computer ran out of battery. So even though we live streamed it for a little bit, we didn't get a recording from it. So here we go again. Roast mutton. Up jumped Bilbo, and putting on his dressing gown, went into the dining room. There he saw nobody, but all the signs of a large and hurried breakfast. There was a fearful mess in the room, and piles of unwashed crooks in the kitchen. Nearly every pot and pan he possessed seemed to have been used. The washing up was so dismally real that Bilbo was forced to believe the party of the night before had not been a part of his bad dreams, as he had rather hoped. Indeed, he was really relieved, after all, to think that they had gone all without him, and without bothering to wake him up. But would never a thank you, he thought. And yet, in a way, he could not help feel just a trifle disappointed. The feeling surprised him. "Don't be a fool, Bilbo Baggins," he said to himself, "thinking of dragons and all that outlandish nonsense at your age." So he put on an apron, lit fires, boiled water, and washed up. Then he had a nice little breakfast in the kitchen before turning out the dining room. By that time the sun was shining. The front door was open, letting in a warm spring breeze. Bilbo began to whistle loudly and to forget about the night before. "You want to offer me some salmon?" "Oh, thank you very much, Anna." "I don't want to eat too much, though. So I'm going to put it here. Save it for later. Can't eat and read at the same time." Bilbo began to whistle loudly and to forget about the night before. In fact, he was just sitting down to a nice little second breakfast in the dining room by the open window when in walked Gandalf. "My dear fellow," said he, whenever are you going to come? What about an early start? And here you are having breakfast, or whatever you call it, at 10:30. They left you a message because they could not wait." "What message?" said poor Mr. Baggins, all in a fluster. "Great elephants," said Gandalf. "You are not at all yourself this morning. You have never dusted the mantelpiece?" "What's that got to do with it? I've had enough to do with washing up for 14. "If you had dusted the mantelpiece, you would have found this, just under the clock," said Gandalf, handing Bilbo a note, written of course on his own notepaper. This is what he read. Thorin and Company, to burglar Bilbo, greeting. For your hospitality, our sincerest thanks, and for your offer of professional assistance, our grateful acceptance. Terms: cash on delivery, up to and not exceeding 1/14 of total profit, if any. All traveling expenses guaranteed, in any event. Funeral expenses to be defrayed by us or our representatives if occasion arises and the matter is not otherwise arranged for. Thinking it unnecessary to disturb your esteemed repose, we have proceeded in advance to make requisite preparations, and shall await your respected person at the Green Dragon Inn, Bywater, at 11 a.m. sharp, trusting that you will be punctual. We have the honor to remain yours deeply, Thorin and Company. "That leaves you just 10 minutes. You'll have to run," said Gandalf. "But," said Bilbo. "No time for it," said the wizard. "But," said Bilbo again. "No time for that either. Off you go." To the end of his days, Bilbo could never remember how he found himself outside without a hat, a walking stick, or any money, or anything that he usually took when he went out. Leaving his second breakfast half finished and quite unwashed up. Oh, yeah. Can you imagine that, Anna? A half-eaten breakfast? I think you can, because yours is usually half-eaten. And quite unwashed up, pushing his key into Gandalf's hand and running as fast as his furry feet could carry him down the lane, past the great mill, across the water, and then on a mile or more. Very puffed he was when he got to Bywater, just on the stroke of 11, and found he had come without a pocket handkerchief. "Bravo!" said Balin, who was standing at the inn door looking out for him. Just then all the others came around the corner of the road from the village. They were on ponies, and each pony was slung about with all kinds of packages, parcels, and paraphernalia. There was a very small pony, apparently for Bilbo. "Up you two get, and off we go," said Thorin. "I'm awfully sorry," said Bilbo, but I have come without my hat, and I have left my pocket handkerchief behind, and I haven't got any money. I didn't get your note until after 10:45, to be precise." "Don't be precise," said Dwalin, "and don't worry. You will have to manage without pocket handkerchief and a good many other things before you get to the journey's end. As for a hat, I have got a spare hood and cloak in my luggage." That's how they all came to start, jogging off from the inn one fine morning just before May, on laden ponies, and Bilbo was wearing a dark green hood, a little weather-stained, and a dark green cloak borrowed from Dwalin. They were too large for him, and he looked rather comic. What his father Bungo would have thought of him, I daren't think. His only comfort was he couldn't be mistaken for a dwarf, as he had no beard. They had not been riding very long when up came Gandalf, very splendid on a white horse. He had brought a lot of pocket handkerchiefs and Bilbo's pipe and tobacco. So after that the party went along very merrily, and they told stories and sang songs as they rode forward all day, except of course when they stopped for meals. These didn't come quite as often as Bilbo would have liked them, but still he began to feel that adventures were not too bad after all. At first they had pressed through. I think I should take your water before you make a pool on your plate. Yep. Concentrate on eating some food, Anna. At first, they had passed through Hobbit lands. Yeah, you can do without the spoon. Through Hobbit lands, a wide, respectable country inhabited by decent folk, with good roads, an inn or two, and now and then a dwarf or a farmer ambling by on business. Then they came to lands where people spoke strangely and sang songs Bilbo had never heard before. Now they had gone on far into the lone lands, where there were no people left, no inns, and the roads grew steadily worse. Not far ahead were dreary hills, rising higher and higher, dark with trees. On some of them were old castles with an evil look, as if they had been built by wicked people. Everything seemed gloomy, for the weather that day had taken a nasty turn. Mostly it had been as good as May can be, even in merry tales, but now it was cold and wet. In the lone lands, they had been obliged to camp when they could, but at least it had been dry. "To think it will soon be June," grumbled Now that's what happens when you try to use your plate as a hat. And now you're without spoon and without plate. But that's fine. You just use your tray. Maybe now you'll eat. Yeah, to think it will soon be June, grumbled Bilbo, as he splashed along behind the others in a very muddy track. It was after tea time. It was pouring with rain, and had been all day. His hood was dripping into his eyes. His cloak was full of water. The pony was tired and stumbled on stones. The others were too grumpy to talk, and I'm sure the rain has gotten into dry clothes and into the food bags, thought Bilbo.
Wow.
Yeah. Bother burgling and everything to do with it. I wish I was at home in my nice hole by the fire, with the kettle just beginning to sing. It was not the last time that he wished that. Still, the dwarves jogged on, never turning around or taking any notice of the hobbit. Somewhere behind the grey clouds, the sun must have gone down, for it began to get dark as they went down into the deep valley with the river at the bottom. Wind got up, and willows along its banks bent and sighed. Fortunately, the road went over an ancient stone bridge, for the river, swollen with rains, came rushing down from the hills and mountains in the north. It was nearly night when they had crossed over. The wind broke up the grey clouds, and a wandering moon appeared above the hills between the flying rags. Then they stopped, and Thorin muttered something about supper and where shall we get a dry patch to sleep on. Not until then did they notice that Gandalf was missing. So far, he had come all the way with them, never saying if he was in the adventure or merely keeping them company for a while. He had eaten most, talked most, and laughed most, but now he simply was not there at all. Just when a wizard would have been most useful too, groaned Dori and Nori, who shared the hobbit's view about regular meals, plenty and often. They decided in the end that they would have to camp where they were. They moved to a clump of trees and thought it was drier under them. The wind shook the rain off the leaves, and the drip drip was most annoying. And though it was drier under them, yeah, the wind made the leaves drip drip. Also, the mischief seemed to have got into the fire. Dwarves can make a fire almost anywhere out of almost anything, wind or no wind, but they could not do it that night. Not even Oin and Gloin, who were specially good at it. Then one of the ponies took flight, at nothing, and bolted. He got into the river before they could catch him, and before they could get him out again, Fili and Kili were nearly drowned, and all the baggage that he carried was washed away off him. Of course, it was mostly food, and there was mighty little left for supper, and less for breakfast. There they all sat, glum and wet and muttering, while Oin and Gloin went on trying to light the fire, and quarreling about it. Bilbo was sadly reflecting that adventures are not all pony rides in May sunshine, when Balin, who was always their lookout man, said, "There's a light over there." There was a hill some way off, with trees on it, pretty thick in parts. Out of the dark mass of the trees, they could now see a light shining, a reddish, comfortable-looking light, as if might be a fire or torch twinkling. When they had looked at it for some while, they fell to arguing. Some said no, and some said yes. Some said they could but go and see, and anything was better than little supper, less breakfast, and wet clothes all the night. Others said, "These parts are none too well known, and are too near the mountains. Travelers seldom come this way now. The old maps are no use. Things have changed for the worse, and the roads are unguarded. They have seldom even heard of the king around here, and the less inquisitive you are as you go along, the less trouble you're likely to find. Some said, "After all, there are 14 of us." Others said, "Where's Gandalf got to?" This remark was repeated by everybody. Then the rain began to pour down worse than ever, and Oin and Gloin began to fight. That settled it. "After all, we have got a burglar with us," they said. And so they made off, leading their ponies, with all due and proper caution, in the direction of the light. They came to the hill and were soon in the wood. Up the hill they went, but there was no proper path to be seen, such as might lead to a house or a farm. And do what they could, they made a deal of rustling and crackling and creaking, and a good deal of grumbling and dratting, and they went through the trees in the pitch dark. Suddenly the red shine shone out very bright through the tree trunks not far ahead. "Now it's the burglar's turn," they said, meaning Bilbo. "You must go on and find out all about the light, and what it is for, and if all is perfectly safe and canny," said Thorin to the hobbit. "Now scuttle off, and come back quick, if all is well. If not, come back if you can. If you can't, hoot twice like a barn owl, and once like a screech owl, and we will do what we can." Off Bilbo had to go, before he could explain that he could not hoot even once like any kind of owl, and any more than fly like a bat. But at any rate, hobbits can move quietly in woods, absolutely quietly. They take a pride in it, and Bilbo had sniffled more than once at what he called all this dwarvish racket as they went along, though I don't suppose you or I would have noticed anything at all on a windy night. Not if the whole cavalcade had passed 2 feet off. Cavalcade, I guess is the word, had passed 2 feet off. As for Bilbo, walking primly towards the red light, I don't suppose even a weasel would have stirred a whisker at it. So, naturally, he got right up to the fire, for fire it was, without disturbing anyone. And this is what he saw. That's a good cliffhanger, isn't it, Anna? Yeah, that's a good place to stop. Now, there's an illustration to this episode, which kind of gives away what he saw. So now people can look at that and wonder how this is going to go, in the event that they haven't heard the story or seen the movie before. All right, and as for you, I definitely have some salmon to clean up. Yep, definitely looking forward to that. See ya all later. I don't know if there will be any more reading, actually. Tomorrow I'm off, and then it's weekend, so maybe the next one will be Monday. We'll see. Yeah. Say bye, Nanner. Bye-bye. Yeah.